All good things, even hot harmony summer, must come to an end eventually, and now that it's been below freezing for weeks in a row, that time has come. But we will be going out with a bang. Here is one more of those riff sections, this time from Red by Lepris, that does something almost uncomfortable to my insides, largely because of how the silly little notes are put together. I'm going to talk a little bit about the whole song, but mostly focus on this most intense part, the short interlude before the last chorus. Brad Osborne, a real cool music theorist who is on my dissertation committee and who wrote a book about Radiohead, has this nice theory about what he calls salience in their music. Basically, it's this idea that if things are too familiar and therefore predictable, we tune out, and also if things are too unpredictable, we will also tune out. Salience, or the amount that music feels important and holds our attention, is maximized in some sweet spot between these two extremes. I think it's probably an intuitive idea for all of us weirdos who listen to weird music, and it's come up in various ways throughout music history. You can probably think of examples on both ends of this spectrum. Osborne does a really cool, thorough job turning this basic idea into a working theory, and showing how in Radiohead's music there tends to be a balance between experimental stuff and conventional stuff. If the harmony is wacky, for example, it's likely that the form and the rhythm will be more conventional, and vice versa. I bring this up because I think this is a good starting point for talking about what's happening in Red. Quick question, what's a pirate's favorite neo-Riemannian transformation? It's R, me mateys. And it sounds like this, going from a major chord to its relative minor, in this case from F major to D minor. The harmony in this song is based mostly on this super familiar framework, which gets dressed up a little bit by adding a passing tone between the F and the D minor, and a dominant chord after the D minor to circle back to the start. And then this gets composed out with some more melody notes in the verse version of this. And then composed out even more with some kind of flickering neighbor notes and suspensions in the interlude section that I'm mainly talking about. The sound of the R transformation is pretty familiar, and these extra notes don't really change that, because for most of it, I find it clear to hear them as suspensions. There is one cool moment at the end of the progression in the interlude where there's a B flat in the bass and the upper notes switches between F and E, which kind of feels like it's flickering between a 4 chord, which is a B flat major, with a B flat to F, implying there's a D in there somewhere, and a 5-7 chord, which is very different, which would be the B flat to the E, which would be the 7th and 3rd of the C7 chord. Both of these chords would make sense here, even if the 5-7 interpretation maybe makes a little more sense because it matches how the progression goes earlier. I bring this up because, kind of as a side note in music theory, you typically get taught not to miss the forest for the trees. In other words, to see these larger patterns and not get too caught up in the details. And that's a useful skill, but it's also good to not miss the trees for the forest. That is, to pay attention to these little details and ambiguities and oddities, because that's often kind of the whole fun thing with any music. But back to the main story. Harmony is familiar and mostly straightforward with these little embellishments, but rhythm is very unfamiliar. The section has a clear beat, and it's in 5/4, and this 5/4 is marked by the changes of chords, so each new measure we get a new chord, pretty straightforward. But the actual groove is super precise, tantalizingly close to being repetitive without actually being meaningfully repetitive, and it puts the attacks in a bunch of hard-to-feel, unexpected places. Here's just the rhythm of that groove. When I was learning this, I initially tried turning it into a series of small units that are kind of strung together. Like, for example, you get a lot of these things where it's 2 quick 16th notes and then 1 attack on its own. But mapping out these motives didn't really help because there's enough stuff that isn't these motives. And even when there are these motives, if the space between them is even 1 16th note different, it makes it so it doesn't even feel the same at all. And also the way they do it, you have these motives ending up with every possible orientation with respect to the beat. So you have somewhere the da-da, da, da-da, da. The second note of those 16th notes lands on the beat. You have da-da, da, da-da. Thing where it comes right after the beat. You have all of these different things and they all feel pretty different. I ended up having to just learn it one measure at a time as a series of self-contained grooves and then string them all together to play the whole thing. So the lack of repetition is a big part of why the rhythm is so slippery. The other is that a huge amount of the attacks are on really hard to feel parts of the beat. I made a little ad hoc system for measuring this where I consider on the beat the easiest spot, on the 8th note offbeat the second easiest, and the other 2 places, either a 16th note right before the beat or right after the beat, the hardest. So if this is my beat and I put things da, da, da right on the beat, that's pretty easy. If I put things right on the 8th note offbeat, so da, 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 that's not too bad either, but it's the ones where it's either a 16th note right before or right after that are pretty tricky. So da, 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 or da, 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 like that. So of the 57 attacks in this short, weird groove, fully 28 of them are on the hardest to feel type of offbeat. Another 13 are on the 8th note offbeat, leaving only 16 on the beat in a section that contains 40 beats. I think it's interesting to kind of look at how intentional these choices are. For example, if all we do is shift all of the attacks in this groove to the right by a 16th note, we have basically the same pattern, but now 25 of the attacks land on the beat, which is a pretty big difference compared to the only 16 landing on the beat. Makes it a lot easier to play if you have a lot more attacks anchored to the beat. Here's a MIDI rendering of that because I'm not about to try to learn to play a version of this groove that feels completely different. Isn't that easier to feel and therefore more boring? All this is to say that it's not just the lack of repetition that makes this hard, it's also the syncopatedness, the extent to which the groove does not line up nicely with the beat. It's still governed completely by the beat, and once you feel it, it is completely tied to the beat. We're always bouncing off the beat or bouncing into the beat with these 16th note offbeats, but nothing, it'd be a lot easier if you had more stuff that was just right on the beat. Da, 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 as opposed to da 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 da, etc. So yeah, this combination of the smooth, assured, familiar harmony with the slippery but very precise groove is super salient for me. Familiar enough to draw me in and activate my expectation forming, but weird enough that it's fun to spend a lot of time with it. I think salience sometimes manifests in hearing, for me, as these compellingly contradictory impressions. In this case, that the riff is both fragile and has all of this kind of pent-up energy. Or, here's another one, that it's both volatile and inevitably end-directed. So yeah, RIP Hot Harmony Summer, and oh yeah, one more thing. See ya.